everybody, and welcome back to my podcast. This is Anne, and this is my podcast in which I talk about my knitting, my spinning, books, and some cross stitch. Just a reminder to viewers who have been around for a while. I have renamed my podcast recently, although it should not affect your subscription here, to Fiber, Floss, and Fiction podcast. I always have to think about that. So I hope you are all well. If you are a new viewer, welcome. I hope that you have a reason to come back and visit with me again in the future. And if you're a returning viewer, of course, welcome back. And I'm super glad to have you here with me today. Today is Sunday, the 28th of April. I almost said February because the last 2 months seems to have disappeared. 2019. So today we're going to talk about a whole whack of stuff. Things here are good, I guess I should just say. We've been having gorgeous spring weather. It's actually been, for us, a little bit rainy. We don't usually have rain here in the high desert in the spring. That's our windy months. We generally, if we're going to get rain, we generally get it in the summer. We have monsoonal flow that comes up out of the Gulf of Mexico and kind of interacts with some of the cooler air that comes south or drops in out of the plains. And so if we're going to get moisture, that's usually when we get it. But we have actually had some rain, which has been really, really nice. We're always concerned here about moisture heading into the hot, dry season and fire season, which has kicked off. So let's see, I've done some stuff around the house recently, put in some bedding plants last weekend when my husband was here, and then I went and got mulch and mulched all those beds yesterday. Just doing some sort of housekeeping kind of stuff. Hang on one second. You need to go lie down. Go get on your bed and lie down. Wandering. Finally got my shower doors installed, so I have been using my new bathroom and it is wonderful. I did not think I would be that excited about having a new bathroom, but I am. Sad to say, I am. What else here? I think that's about it. So let's go ahead, let's just jump right on in because I have not been able to keep these down under pushing an hour recently, so let's just get on with the crafty stuff. Okay, so gonna start off with knitting. A few things of note. I will be recording later on today a separate video if you are a member of my Celtic Shawl Club that will be talking about the Festival of Beltane. That is coming up May 1st. And so if you're in that shawl club, pop on over. You can take a listen to that one if you're interested in more information about that festival. However, I have also designed a garment for this particular festival. This is knit with Rauma Yarn's Fennel Garn, which is a traditional fingering weight, jumper weight type wool. This is a unisex vest, and I drew on the concept of the Green Man, which has to do with the Beltane fertility concept and just the growth of all green things that's happening here in the Northern Hemisphere. And I created this vest. This is a men's size, and if you follow me on Instagram, you will see tomorrow, Monday, my posts with my model actually wearing it. So it's a little big looking because it had to fit Diego in his 6'3" Ness. So this is knit with 4 colors of green and then that kind of bronzy brown. I wanted this to feel like dappled sunlight coming through tree leaves, and hopefully I have done that. Here is the back. So it's knit in a traditional stranded knitting style where you knit in the round, corrugated ribbing at the bottom, and on the sleeves and the neckline, the sleeves and the neckline are steeked, meaning their waist stitch is cast on, and then you cut that open and pick up to knit the ribbing for those. Really love how this turned out. I wish it was a little bit smaller because I would totally wear this. I just love this piece. I love the colors in it. I love how it looks. So this is going to be available on Ravelry tomorrow morning or this afternoon, depending on how fast I get this uploaded. So that is the Beltane vest. You will also note that I am wearing a finished new piece. This is my Cascadas tee, which is designed by Susanna IC. It is a yoke neck, short sleeve top. And I knit this from Deep Stash Silky Wool by Elizabeth Level that I had, I can't remember the color number, but it's kind of like a dusty gray blue, which goes with almost everything I own in my wardrobe. It's in the upper 70s here today, so it's actually perfect to wear just as is, but I think I'm going to wind up wearing it quite a bit in the fall or changing seasons where I would layer it over a long sleeved t-shirt. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah, so a pretty quick and fast knit. I think the fact that it took me 2 months to knit it is a little bit deceptive because, you know, I was knitting this and a pair of socks at the same time, but I'm very pleased with how it came out. It's a little bit long on me, but that's a silky wool thing. I knit to the pattern instructions, but then when you block silky wool, it tends to grow a bit on you, so I'm glad that I didn't add any extra length. Yeah. So that is finished. That's one of my Make 9 challenge in the knitting world for things to get done this year, and it's more yarn out of stash, and I think I used about 700 yards. The designer is Susanna IC, and I will link to the Ravelry pattern page down below like I usually do in case you would like to make it yourself. Well written and you know, easy to follow pattern. The only thing that I would say, well, I guess 2 notes. The first note is the yoke depth, meaning the neckline to your armpit, is the same for every single size. So if you decide to make this, I would go ahead and do a quick measure of yourself because it's the number I would normally use for like a size 38 is the depth that she has for this depth. And that's one of the places that these types of yoke sweaters tend not to fit. I usually have it customized for each size, so it's shorter for the smaller sizes and it's deeper for the larger sizes. So just something to take a look at. It might be perfect for you as is, but look at the schematic before you start. The other thing I did, which I was not sure of the reasoning behind it, was she had you start with a temporary cast on, and then after you finish the whole thing to go back and pick up this little ribbing that's right here at the neckline. It's like 3/4 of an inch. I'm not totally sure why you would do that unless you wanted to have a very firm upper edge, but the neckline sits fairly high up, so I wanted to keep it stretchier, so I just cast on and I worked the ribbing, and then I just started down the bottom. I didn't go back and pick up the stitches, so it seemed to work out fine. It's not like I have trouble pulling it on over my head, or it's not falling off my shoulders or anything weird. I mean, it's basically sitting where it needs to sit. So I don't know, maybe in the larger sizes if the neckline's a little bit wide, but I don't know that that's the case because I just knit the pattern at this point. Didn't work with the numbers on it. So let's talk a little bit further about what other things I've been working on. I have been knitting a pair of vintage Fairy Light socks. The pattern is by Helen Stewart. Here's a photo of the finished socks when they are done. And I opted to use stash yarn for this. This is a fingering weight yarn from a homespun house. It is the Bakken fingering or sock weight yarn in the colorway the Potions Master. It is a 70% superwash merino, 25% cashmere, 5% nylon, sock yarn base, 436 yards and 100 grams. So here is the yarn. And I am almost done the very first sock. This one is knit from the top down. It features 1x1 ribbing, and then this little kind of rosebuddy type pattern, and then ribbing for the leg and onto the foot. And I did go ahead and put in the heel flap on these. I hadn't knit one of those in a while, and I was like, yeah, I'm in the mood for that. They fit me really nicely, this type of heel flap, but they're a little bit fiddly if you don't like to pick up stitches compared to like the Fish Lips Kiss heel. But I've started the toe decreases, so I just need to finish toe decreases and then I'm done with sock number 1. So depending on how the next week goes, I may try to get that done. We'll see. Those of you who have watched me before, I think probably know that I'm going to be taking a holiday to Scotland with my husband in a couple of weeks. And so if I don't have those finished, but I have started the second one, I'm probably going to leave them at home just because there's not enough left to warrant lugging them for plain knitting. I know this seems ridiculous, but it's a really long flight and I would rather have a project I can work on like the whole way there and back. So I have one secret knitting project that I'm working on right now, which I can't show you, but if I don't have that finished, I will take it with me and then just take this one other extra project that I'm going to show you. If I do have that project finished, I'm probably going to take 2 pairs of socks to work on because we have, let's see, so we fly from DC to New York. We're flying out of LaGuardia direct to Edinburgh. The Edinburgh flight is like 7.5 hours, I think. And yes, it's technically at night, but I don't sleep very well on the plane. So I know from past experience going overseas that I tend to just knit a lot. And I think on the way there, we have like a 5-hour layover in LaGuardia before we get on the plane. And I think we have a 7-hour layover on our way back home, which we could almost just drive. Just saying. Anyway, so that's a lot of knitting time for me, and I will need more than a pair of socks. I know this for a truth. So what I have picked to take with me is a cool pattern that I found. I'm really interested to try the heel construction called Dragonstone, and it's inspired by the Dragonstone Castle from the Song of Fire and Ice George R.R. Martin series. This is going to be used as a project for our second quarter knit along in the Willy Wonka Fibers Ravelry group, where we're doing fandom themed pieces. So Game of Thrones, Fire and Ice, I think we can do that. Anyway, here is a picture of the socks. I don't know if you can see, but it has a very interesting heel construction here. So the arch is also part of this heel construction. So I'm interested to see how it works out because it looks like a very interesting construction that might be different and new, which I'm always looking for something fun to do with socks because I've knit a lot of socks and it's just fun to do something different. I should say the designer's name, who is Samantha Holt. And I'm going to be using this fingering weight, sock weight yarn. This is by Ocean Wind Knit, so dyed by my friend Lori. It's a 4-ply BFL sock is the name of the sock yarn. It's 100% superwash, British Blueface Leicester, 437 yards and 100 grams. And I think this is going to be beautiful in that sock pattern because it's got kind of greens, grays, blues kind of all mixed in there. It would actually go with what I have on. So very subtle color shifts in it, but that will be kind of my main travel project when we go overseas. Okay, so that is what I am up to in the world of knitting. Moving on to spinning. This should be pretty quick. I have been doing some spinning. I showed you my finished yarn last time we talked, and I have spun up the first 2 ounces of this pretty just natural wool, colored wool that Brenda gave me when we were in Arizona. It's up in 2 weeks now. I guess it must be 2 weeks ago. So I have the first 2 ounces spun up, and I've spun it fairly fine. It's a Cormo, and I probably wouldn't do socks with it, but I think it would be nice as a small shawlette or a cowl or something to wear up next to your neck because it's very soft and squishy. So this is the roving that she brought me. The farm at the end of the road, it's an Arizona farm, and they have a whole bunch of different types of sheep. Tunis, California Red, Cotswold, Cormo, which is what this is, and various crossbreed sheep. And they do fleece and roving. So this is the second 2 ounces. I will, I think, start that sometime this week. I have kind of a funky schedule this week, so we'll see if I get it started, but I would like to at least get going on it because I'm kind of behind on my spinning goals. Okay, so that's spinning. See, I told you that was going to be quick. All right, let's jump ahead to books. Okay, I have a bunch of finished books, 2 of which I talked about last time, but I've actually finished them, so let me give you a little bit more information on them. The first is called H is for Hawk. The author is Helen McDonald. This is a sort of memoir. She wrote this book after her father had died, but it's about the year in her life just after she lost her father, who she was very close to. And it also coincides with this time that she decided she wanted to train a young goshawk. This book, it's not really about training a hawk. It's about her path through coming to terms with the death of her father, getting through her grief, or at least starting to get through her grief, and kind of that whole process and how this creature was wrapped up in her attempts to get through this without even knowing that she was sort of doing this as an attempt to get through her grief. She's somebody who writes very well. I listened to this as an audiobook, and she, the author, is the person who read it, which I really am coming to like quite a bit because you get all of the interesting inflections that the author intended because it's in her voice or his voice. I think that it's kind of an eclectic market who might be interested in this book. If you have any kind of squeamishness about the fact that hawks are raptors and that they hunt for and eat meat, do not read this book. It will not suit you at all. That's to say, it's not gratuitous, but that is what she's training the hawk to do. She's training the hawk to catch things, and part of the training involves, little dead things from the freezer and eventually little live things from the fields. And she talks somewhat about how the fact that, hawks are, by their inherent nature as wild animals, they are very effective killing creatures. How that kind of is wrapped into her perceptions about death and human death versus animal death versus what she thinks death is. So there's that aspect of it. Sort of, if you're into that sort of naturalism, you'd probably find this book interesting. She's also, because she's a Cambridge lecturer in history and literature, she ties in the writings of T.H. White, who, if you don't know who he is, he's British. He's a British author, kind of a contemporary with Tolkien. So he's writing in that period kind of between the wars, and he has the baggage of World War I kind of overhanging a lot of the things that he thinks about. He also had a horrible childhood and not such a great experience at school as a boy. He is the person who wrote The Once and Future King, and if you haven't read that, it is a retelling of the Arthurian legend, And it is the book from which Disney created the cartoon version of the Arthur legend, and is basically what we think of if you picture the stories of Merlin with the pointy hat with stars on it. That's T.H. White's imagery. So she refers to this a lot because White wrote a book called The Goshawk that's about his attempts to train hawks. And definitely is a book that was a product of its time, but she ties in the information in it because she read it when she was a young girl interested in training falcons and learning about falconry. She also ties in some historical references, a book on falconry from the 1660s, and talks about kind of the male-dominated society that would have been most involved with either training or raising or using falcons to hunt with. So there's a lot going on in this book. It's relatively short, but if you are interested in that sort of history of literature, history of history, history of falconry, anything to do with birds, it's an interesting read. I gave it, I think, like 3 3/4, almost 4 stars. It wasn't a book that I would recommend to everybody, and it wasn't a book that I was totally enraptured with, but I found it very interesting, and it pushed a lot of my personal interest buttons. So for me, it was, it was a good read. Maybe not great, but a good read. Okay, so that is H is for Hawk. Next up is The Emperor's Blades, which I read for a prompt in extra credit prompt in the School of Magic Stitches. This is one where you had to pick an author with one of the Marauders' initials. So this author's name is Brian Stavely. I think that's right. Thank you, Jessie Marie, for pointing that one out because it was not on my radar, but I am glad I read it. It is another book in a series, which seems to be my downfall this year. But that said, this was very good. It took me the first maybe 20 to 25% of it to really get into it because, as with many books at the beginning of a series, you're being introduced to the characters and the world building. Fantasy book. It's basically talks about 2 brothers, one of whom is the heir to the throne, who has been sent off to further his education with a group of monks at a very remote monastery, and it's very aesthetic, not aesthetic, but aesthetic. Like, they don't get much to eat, and they do a lot of manual labor, and they sort of have a loincloth on kind of thing, and there's not like heat or central plumbing kind of thing. Very bare bones. So he's learning how to live with deprivation and kind of control his impulses and to think deep thoughts. His younger brother, who is not the heir, or is not the direct heir, has been sent off to join this military group who are kind of the elite SEAL team, if you will, that train on these massive sort of pterodactyl type birds that they use to airdrop people in who are also fighting machines. They can put a crew of, I think it's 5 or 6 on these birds, so they're massive. And so this younger brother has learned to, assassinate people and all those kind of like secret ops type missions. And their sister, who was never in line for the throne, she's still in the main city. She becomes one of her father's advisors / ministers, and then her father, the emperor, is killed. And so it sets off this whole chain of events. And so there is a fair amount of sort of swashbuckling type adventure in it, but it is set in a different world and a different set of powers. There's some magic in it, but it's a small group. That's not the main focus of the book. But it is definitely fantasy. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to when I started it, because as I said, it was a little slow to get into, but wound up really, really enjoying it. And it fit a prompt for extra credit, so 2 thumbs up. So then I was out of extra credit reads for March and April, so I moved on to sort of some random stuff that I was just gonna get from the library to read. So the first of those is a book that had been recommended to me by my friend Victoria. Kind of a little out of my normal wheelhouse. It's called Big Magic. And it is by Elizabeth Gilbert, who is the author who wrote Eat, Pray, Love. This book is nonfiction. It is not exactly a self-help book, but I will say that if you are somebody who has ever said, oh, I could never do that, I'm not creative enough, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not talented enough, or fill in the blank enough, you should go get this book and read it, because she just lays it out there very straightforwardly. And she talks about her creative process and how she's become a writer, and how she feels that the creation of anything, whatever it is, whether it's writing, music, knitting, pottery, cooking, whatever, involves big magic, and you should not underestimate the power of big magic. And I really appreciated the fact that one of the things that she stresses in this book is not that it's not that inspiration doesn't exist, but inspiration is not going to come find you if you don't work at it. And I certainly feel that that's true. Yes, it's good to take a step back if you're feeling like you're kind of stuck in a rut and you need to get the creative juices flowing, but there's nothing wrong with just trying stuff and having it not work and say, well, that was an interesting learning experience, and taking the positive of what that is, because maybe down the road you'll find something that interests you some more. And one of the things that she talks about in this book, and this is maybe 3/4 of the way through, is she talks about writing this book called, I believe it's The Signature of All Things. And the way that this book came into being is that she felt like she needed a little break. She was still working every day. She was still writing stuff, but nothing was really sparking her imagination. But she had just bought a new house, and she decided she wanted to put a garden in. And so she put in some plants that she got, and then she thought, you know what, I'm going to find out a little bit about each of these plants. So as she said, literally 1 minute of internet research, and there were 4 plants that she was like, oh, well, that's where these came from. And oh, did you know tulips were originally from Turkey, kind of by way of the Dutch, in terms of the folks who kind of pushed them to a forefront position in terms of world knowledge, but they're originally Turkish flowers. So she had done this with a few plants in her garden, and then she got very interested in how plants had come to be used on the world market, and she went and did some research, and she found some experts who she talked to, and she did some traveling and some more research, and she wound up writing this very interesting book that's about 19th century horticultural traders, if you will, trader, Traders, people who trade. And so, you know, her point being that any little thing can spark interest and inspiration, and you should grab it with both hands and follow it along whatever path it goes down, and to not try to limit yourself. The other thing that I think is a really great takeaway from this book is the fact that there is nothing wrong with not doing the thing that you love as a full-time job. She happens to, I happen to, but her point being is there's nothing wrong with working a 9-to-5 job and then continuing to do the thing you love as your hobby, but do it at a high level. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So a good little book. I really enjoyed it. I like her writing style, and this is another audiobook, so again, she read it, so I appreciated hearing her voice throughout. That was really fun. So yeah, I mean, you're looking for something short to read, I recommend it. I liked her writing. I liked her presentation of the ideas, and I think it's something that anybody who has self-doubt, whether it's a big amount of self-doubt or a small amount of self-doubt, because I think we all have it, you should read. I think there are kernels of wisdom in there that could benefit anybody. Okay, last book. The Story of Arthur Truelove by Elizabeth Berg. So this is another book I picked up at my library. It had been on my to-read list. Didn't really know very much about it. It's about this story of an elderly man who's Arthur, who's lost his wife, Nola, and he goes to visit her every day at the cemetery. He takes lunch and he sits with her every day. And while he's at the cemetery, he meets this young girl who is troubled and kind of difficult, and they strike up kind of an unlikely friendship. And so this is a really quiet little book. Some things happen, but nothing earth-shattering. It's definitely not action-packed. It's a very quiet little book about what is a family, what is love, and what are the types of love, and what is the power of friendship. I love the characters in this book. Like I said, it's kind of a quiet little book, so it's not something that's going to grab you and, shake you around with fanfare. But it's a sweet little story, and if you need something like that in your life, highly recommended. I don't really have a ton to say about it. Read the synopsis. I'll link to Goodreads down below and see if it's kind of your jam. I enjoyed it. It's maybe a little bit outside what I would normally read, but I did love the character of Arthur. He's a wonderful man, and everybody should be so lucky to have a friend or a husband or a next door neighbor like him, because while he doesn't always get it right, his heart is always in the right place, and he tries to do the right thing. And he's very down to earth, which I like as well. Okay, so that's going to get us through books. Let's move on to cross stitch. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to insert a set of 2 clips here for you to watch. These are going to cover the projects that I worked on for the last 2 weeks for my School of Magical Stitches and Literature homework. There's a whole whack of them, so be prepared. I did try to move through them pretty quickly, but there's still a lot of them. So let me go let you watch that, and when you come back, I will talk to you some more about what's been going on the rest of this week. Hello everybody, this is Anne, and I am checking in to talk to you guys about my weekly homework. This is for the week of April 13th. I want to say year 3, week 8 maybe. So the topic this week, we had 3 different options. We could choose to work on one main project, basically. Either pick one shop out of a list of shops in Hogsmeade. This was about our visit to Hogsmeade. We could put 1,000 stitches in on that and write a story. We could opt to stay behind at Hogwarts and I think it was 1,500 stitches on something totally unrelated, but you had to also come up with a story. Or we could visit each of the 10 shops. If you did the points, you kind of figured out that if you went to, I believe it was 6 shops, based on the bonus points with that, as well as just the individual points, you kind of came out ahead. But it also meant switching up a lot of projects. So I dug deep. I was actually able to come up with 10, and I'm going to show you those. Now, some projects I repeated because they wound up fitting more than one prompt, but let's just go ahead on through those so you guys can see what I worked on. So the first step was a trip to Dervish and Bangs, which is the magical equipment store. So I pulled out Winter Fairy, and I kind of wished I had looked at this earlier, but she has a crystal ball right here. I know it's sort of snow globy, but it's big. It looks like one of the divination crystal balls that they use. So I'm going to wind up pulling her out for an ultimate challenge project later on when I get to that point. But for now, I put in 100 stitches on her. This is a color and cotton 28 count even weave, July fabric of the month. I worked on her wing a little bit, and I brought down the flesh color here. So that was the 100 stitches on that project. Love working on her. So glad I now have an excuse to pull her out later, and you can be sure that I'm going to use this one for crystal balls in the future if I need that. So next up was a trip to Glad Rags Wizard Wear. It's a clothing store. I opted to work on my Welcome Winter project from the Drawn Thread. You can see it has a striped house scarf in it, so that's why I'm using it. I'm doing this on just a little scrap of a 28 count Zweigart linen. I think it's called Icy Blue, something like that. But anyway, I worked on the L a little bit, and then I added the red of the striped scarf. We did not have to work on the specific thing that we were referring to, but I just happened to be at a good point to do that, so I went ahead and worked on the scarf. So that was 100 stitches in that one. Next up, I had been struggling with the Summer Sampler by Cooler Design Studios on the 40 count linen that I was doing it on, and I had made the decision I was going to do a restart. So this wound up being a perfect excuse to do that because I also had 4 things that I could use it for. So let me show you what I am working it on, and then we will talk about the prompts. This is a 32 count Zweigart Even Weave. It's a Murano. It's from XJU Designs, and the colorway is Sand. Here is her tag. So because I had 4 things to attribute this to, I actually got quite a bit done. So everything you see here is brand new. I am working on the vignette up here at the top with the little kids. I've like worked that half of the outline and put in some of the water, and I've brought these darker bands over. So for the Hogshead Pub, the Hogshead Pub actually has on the sign a severed pig's head. This pattern has pigs in it, so I used it for that. I then also used it for the quill shop because they sell quills and stationery and parchment, and there is this parchment that the Star Spangled Banner is written on in that design. I also used it for the Hogsmeade rail station because there's a suitcase down here and like travel stickers and kind of letters from abroad, as well as a compass. All of those are travel oriented things. And then I also used it for the Three Broomsticks pub because one of the drinks that they serve in that pub is mead, and mead has honey in it, and there is a beehive and little bees in this. So it wound up fitting a whole bunch of things, which I was really pleased about. That definitely made this task a lot easier, that I could just work on it, put my 400 stitches in, and call it good. So that is the restart on that. I love this fabric. I'm much, much happier with this restart, so super glad I had a reason to do that. Of course, then I didn't want to put it down, but y'all know how that goes. Okay, so then the next prompt was for Honeyduke's Sweets Shop. And so I used the concept of Bertie Bott's Every Flavored Beans, and this project, which is April Wordplay by Brenda Gervais, has the word jelly beans in it. So I put my 100 stitches in on this one. I finished up the wagon, and I started the little rabbit's denim jeans that he's wearing, and I added 2 letters to just finish out the thread that was living over there. Okay, then I used another Brenda Gervais pattern, Christmas Tea, for 2 of the other prompts. I used it for Madame Puttyfoot's tea shop because, I mean, hello, tea. And then I also used it for Zonko's joke shop because one of the joke items I found on the Pottermore Wikipedia is a nose-biting teacup, and again, there's a teacup in it. So I worked on Miss Mouse. I got her head finished, her little mousy paw, finished her tail, added the green, and then I finished her dress. I had rose here and her sleeve to do. This is being stitched on 32 count Ren from Picture This Plus, all color and cotton hand-dyed flosses. And then last but not least, we had to focus on the Shrieking Shack. And I pulled out my When Witches Go Riding by the Prairie Schooler because it has this old funky looking haunted house in it. And I worked on, I finished up the thread I had going to do these two fence lines. I added that little red leaf, and I think I put a few stitches of brown in just to finish a thread. 100 stitches isn't a ton of real estate on these, so oops, as I throw the pattern on the floor. Hand-dyed silks by me, as well as a hand-dyed 28 count linen by me. So that was my 10 shops. I was actually pretty impressed that the stuff I had fit so nicely. I'm not sure that'll ever happen again, but I took advantage of it because it got me bonus points for selecting this option, and actually more points than I would have gotten if I had just done, you know, the 1,000 or 1,500 stitches. So that is where this week stands. I will be back to talk to you guys about the sort of final full week in the Magical Stitches homework in just a bit. Talk to you later. Bye. Hello everybody, this is Anne, and today is Tuesday, April 23rd. I am checking in to talk to you guys about this week's homework, as well as some extra credit kind of stuff. So you will recognize this is the Village of Hawk Run Hollow. Pattern is by Carriage House Sampling. I've been working on this for several different things. So let's talk first about the ultimate challenge stuff that I've put in on this for the School of Magical Stitches and Literature. I have used this for two separate ultimate challenge prompts, one of which is the Dumbledore and Privet Drive. He puts out the lights on Privet Drive. So I used this center block right here for that because privets is a type of fast-growing evergreen tree slash hedge. So obviously this has a ton of trees. And I finished up this block, which is block number 5. These two blocks were my Make 9 challenge sections of this piece. So that task is done. And then I also use this for the prompt about Nalini, who also in the ultimate challenge list. So 1,000 stitches on something that had to do with her. And since she was a snake, I went ahead and used this project too because it's got snakes right here in block number 1. So for those 1,000 stitches that I put in, I added, I think these two blocks right here, and started on some of the detailing on this block. This is going to be the blacksmith's shop. And I thought I would go ahead and work on this to get some of the frames done. And then that way I would have placement if I needed to jump around and do other things. And I'm super glad that I did because the grist mill block, which is block number 8, is perfect for this week's homework. We had to put 300 stitches in green, which I did down here, and then work 300 stitches on a building, and this is the grist mill building itself. So I'm going to use this for one other task in the ultimate challenge, so I'll have another 1,000 stitches to put in this. I'm going to be using it for the final prompt in that, which is Voldemort tried to kill Harry 7 times. Because this project, hang on, let me get the cover sheet, has a graveyard in it. And obviously, if you are killed, you get buried in a graveyard. So the blocks that I've worked on, this is the blacksmith's shop that I added just a little bit of the ground, and I started on a horse's tail. And then this is the grist mill that I just put stitches in. So to be honest, you guys, I am so amazed and thrilled at how much I've gotten done on this. I was really stalled out on this block, and I think pushing through to get that done earlier this month in April really helped me kind of get moving again on this. I'm not sure when this is going to come out again. I still may take this as a travel project for middle of May because it doesn't require a ton of different floss colors, and I can work on it, you know, pretty easily. It's a 22 count heart hanger from Picture This Plus in the colorway Legacy, I believe it is. And I'm stitching it 1/1 using DMC. So just give you a little close-up of that block that I worked on. So you will see this again before the end of the year. I didn't have any specific goals to achieve on this, so other than these 2 blocks. So those are done, and I'm quite happy with you know, where I've gotten to on this. If I get more done on it, it's just all icing on the cake at this point, which Magical Stitches is turning out to be all about the icing for me this year because I'm getting so much stuff done. It's kind of mind-boggling. So that is my homework for this last full week of year 3. There'll be a couple of short days next week, which I'll probably just tack on to that 1st of May video because hopefully this little clip will appear in the video that I film this weekend. So I will talk to you guys later back in the main video. So welcome back. Hopefully you enjoyed those clips. Let me talk to you a little bit about what else has been going on. I had finished the extra credit for School of Magical Stitches and Literature. I'm just going to call it the school from now on. Y'all know what I'm talking about. So I've been working on Ultimate Challenge projects, and I hauled out Hawk Run Hollow, Village of Hawk Run Hollow, to get through a couple of those. And you might remember blocks 4 and 5 are part of my Make 9 challenge or Stitch 9 challenge, and I got both of those finished. There they are. So there's block 4 and block 5. And you can see I have started to do the block outlines for blocks 6, 8, and 9, because my thought was that I would be able to then utilize those spaces like without having to count quite as much if there were homework projects that used themed things, you know, animals or colors or words or whatever. I am going to probably take this as my travel project just because it's one of the few things I have that has a limited number of colors. I don't think I brought those up, but they fit on one ring. And I think it's only like 15 or 18 or something like that, but not very many compared to like my full coverage pieces. And I can work on this in most lights. Like I don't need a ton. It doesn't have to be super, super bright light to see it. This is a 20 count heart hanger from Picture This Plus in the colorway Legacy. And I have a couple of these that I want to use either for extra credit for May, June in the school or Ultimate Challenge stitches in the school. So I thought I could take that and then I would be okay to have, you know, I might be able to get some homework out of it on the week that I'm gone, but if not, I can still work on it, and it isn't like a super massive project to use or to take. Then I also worked on Stargazer by Mirabilia, which I'm sure everyone has seen, but there she is if you have not. And I was really pretty pleased with how much work I got done on her this go round. I am stitching her on a 28 count even weave from Picture This Plus. The colorway is Phantom, which is a dark blue purple. And there she is. So I have gotten, let me show you on this picture real quick. So she's completely done to here except for the sparkly stuff in the sky. And then I have done this whole section here in the front with the exception of a couple of those bottom ruffles. The colors kind of pull over into that section, which is basically like page 3 of the 4. And yes, I'm aware this is a massive amount of skirt still to be done, but it is basically all on one page. So I have a page to go. That sounds like really doable, right? So I am beading as I go in this front part of her skirt. And I have a couple more of the white, kind of these pearl beads. They're getting really washed out, but those pearl beads to go in there and down there. That just was easier for me, and it fits on the frame I'm using, the Q-snap I'm using for her. Love how this is coming out on this fabric. Just love it. I think she's so beautiful. And it's really interesting to me how different the colors in her skirt look from this picture against this fabric. It's crazy the way it really changes the ribbon color. But I love it. I think it's beautiful. So she will come out for sure for some extra credit in the school in the next, well, during May at some point. I feel like if I could get like 3 or 4 days of just solid work in on her, I would be happy with that for May, with the amount of time I'm going to be away. And I wouldn't take this with me as a travel project or anything. So, but that's where she stands, and just really enjoyed working on her. So much fun. Then for the last couple of days, I have been working on a stitching shelf, which is I have an Earth Designs chart, artwork by Amy Stewart. And I'm working on page 4, which this is the edge of page 4. My goal for this is 2,600 stitches every month, which will get me through six pages of the large format pages by the end of the year. And so this section right here finished up the bottom half of page 3, which was my April goal. So everything I've put in here is actually my May goal. And I have 300 more stitches here to finish up for an ultimate challenge project for 1,000 stitches. So once I get those done, I just have I have 400 stitches right here left to finish for my May goal. So I'm hoping that I can bang that out pretty quickly, and then maybe even start on my June goal to kind of stay one step ahead of this. I mean, the more stitches I can put in it, the better, since it's like a 13-year project. And I'm very excited because right up here is where it starts getting into the first vignette that has the lady stitching, which will be right about here. And by the time I finish this page completely, I'll be about 1/3 of the way across this monster for this first tier of pages. So, yeah, there we go. Kind of see where I'm working on that. And love working on it. It's just really, really big. Okay. Is that everything that I worked on? Oh, and I should mention that I worked on that for the Jessie Marie Does Stuff birthday sale. Quick side note. So I stitched growing up, the kind of hippie school that I went to. We learned to cross stitch when I was 5 or 6. And we used to get to go to a one-room schoolhouse for like 1 week out of every semester. And one of the things we would do, because we weren't allowed to go outside and play at recess, because it was as if it was in the 19th century, is we had to stay inside and do needlework. So cross stitch, I have done that for many years, and certainly did lots of hand sewing and things when I worked in clothing, costume design. But I hadn't really done a lot of cross stitch until it's been about 3 years. It'll be 3 years this summer. And the reason that I picked it back up was I had to have some emergency surgery about 3 years ago. Not emergency like go in with the ambulance, but like go into the doctor and have them be like, can you come back in a week and have this major surgery? Kind of fun times. Anyway, I had 6 weeks where I was not allowed to pick anything up heavier than 5 pounds, which when you work for yourself is a lot of enforced time biting your nails, thinking I'm not getting anything accomplished because I can't. So The first week I sort of laid in bed and twitched, as my dad would say, and that's an exaggeration. I mean, I got up and I like walked to the porch and I sat outside, but basically I didn't do anything because I couldn't really do much. That's my work at that point. And I had been surfing some stuff on YouTube and I ran into this charming, upbeat, fun person who was working on cross stitch. And I thought, I'm gonna get back into that. And the person was Jessie Marie. So she is my floss tube gateway drug, and totally happy to be addicted to that. So thank you, Jess, and I hope that you had an amazing birthday and that this trip around the sun this year will be wonderful for you. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to talk to you guys about, we got our homework last night. Kate and Vicky announced what the deal is for the short 2 days that are going to be Monday and Tuesday. Now, we can't work on this until Monday. They had us put together a WIPs list. You could have up to 20 projects on it, so I had 20 projects on it. And we had to take the project from that list that was the smallest size overall, meaning like the smallest stitch count. And that's what we're going to work on for the 2 days that we have in this week. To every 100 stitches gets a point. And if you can finish the project and fully finish it, you get a 50-point bonus for your house. Y'all have seen several of my projects. I do not have that many small projects, and the ones I have aren't very far along. This is the winner, Christmas Tea. It is the smallest that I have by a very narrow margin to one other, but that is Christmas Morning Pets, which is the Dimensions School Petite kit, which has almost no stitches put in it and has a ton of back stitching and is just a hair larger than this project. So Christmas Tea it is. This is on 32 count linen in the colorway Wren from Picture This Plus, and this is one of the ones that I worked on for the little pop-up Easter weekend pop-up challenge to stitch on something dark, stitch on an animal, and stitch on something light or white. I can't remember which, but at any rate, this is where I am. Yeah. So let's just take a quick look at this. I have this massive teacup to stitch. I have most of the border, just that little corner is done, and it's not even done. I don't have the white in there yet, so I just have the red. I have all of the holly to stitch, and I have Santa Mouse. Okay, so here is Magical Stitches ruling my life, guys. I work for myself. I try not to work on weekends. I try not to do business work on weekends because if I let myself go there, I tend to work 7 days a week, and that's just not healthy. You can do it when you need to, but it's not good to do every single weekend. So I try very hard to put that end point on myself. I went into my shop today. I have a big shipment to go out Monday to my Celtic Shawl Club folks. I was gonna, get up at my usual 5 o'clock time and work my way through getting all the labels printed and everything packed up and ready to ship. I had some paperwork I needed to do. I did all of that today so that I can free up some hours to work on this tomorrow. I don't know that I can get this done, but you know what? I'm gonna give it a college try. I'm gonna see what I can do to get it completed. I don't know if that's crazy or wrong on so many levels, or if it's just so very right. So I still do have some work to do tomorrow, and I have some client calls and things on Tuesday I can't really not do. But there's nothing to say I can't get up at 5 a.m. tomorrow like I normally would for a work day and work on this for a couple hours before I go and get in my dye room, as opposed to packing packages for those first 2 hours before I break for breakfast. So wish me luck. We'll see how far I get. If nothing else, I know that I will make some great progress on that one. It's part of my Stitch 9 challenge, and that would leave me with, I think, 3 left to finish this year. 3. So Stargazer is on there, which you saw. The Snow for Christmas project, which actually lives in the same project bag. That's this little guy. That's on my Stitch 9. And one of the Brenda Gervais word plays, the September one. So that would be all I would have left. So I'm going to give it a shot. I don't think I'm going to get it done, but you know what? Maybe having had Jessie Marie's birthday sale this past couple of days will motivate me to channel my inner Jess, and I'll just be like, well, I had kind of a slow day today. I only put in 5,000 stitches on this, so I'm going to try to do better tomorrow. Because Jess, you know that's how you are. Okay, so I think that that's my plan for the next couple of days. I'm not going to go into the extra credit reading and stitching pieces that came out with the May-June prompts in School of Magical Stitches. I'll just do those when I get to them. Suffice it to say that I have all of my projects mapped out for the most part. My little book. Books and projects. Even though I don't have all the projects written in on this side, I have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to do for most, if not all of them already. So I'll just be working on those as I get to them, and you guys will see them as that comes along. So that's it for today. I hope you guys are having a great weekend wherever you are, enjoying either the spring or the fall in your neck of the woods. And I won't talk to you in 2 weeks. I'm debating whether I want to do a short, like a truncated video next weekend. I might do that before we go on holiday. If I don't, it's probably going to be over 3 weeks by the time we get back. I don't know. We'll see. You'll find out, as will I, whether I record next weekend or this coming weekend or not. So until I talk to you guys again, take care. Have fun with all of your crafting, and be well, my friends.